Hi, this is Jared here again with another episode of CX Disruptors. Today, I've got Robin Gareiss, who is the CEO and principal analyst at Metrigy. I'll let her add anything in case I didn't get enough of it.
Oh, that's good, Jared. I guess the only thing I would add is that I have the wonderful fortune of covering CX as a topic area. We have a team of analysts here at the company, and I love the area that I cover. It's just I think one of the most exciting because there's so much going on in the CX world right now.
And that's actually why I'm one, or not the only reason, but one reason I'm excited you're here is because you're not just kind of a general industry analyst. You actually do a lot of the research firsthand.
Absolutely. So
So
pretty much anything I go out and talk about or I say I can back up with research. I think that's the most powerful way to do things. I might have my own thoughts on what's happening in the industry or what's not happening. And, I like to say most of the time I'm pretty well on target, but there are times where I'm not because the research tells me otherwise. So I always follow the research and what's happening out there.
And that's what I'm so excited about. Very few people have actually done the research for everything, or most of it. So then we'll start with question number one. Um, we talk a lot about like a customer service gap, this difference between what businesses are actually delivering and what consumers want. And I know, for example, ever since ChatGPT came out, suddenly consumers are seeing almost like how Apple set the standard or Amazon Prime set the standard. They're going, wow, like this actually works. This is what I want. Why don't I have it?
Right,
Um,
right.
what do you think about that? Or are there any other big gaps that we're missing because we're focused on AI?
Yeah, there are a lot of gaps. I will say that. So I can't go over every single one of them in the time we have today, but I'd love to talk about this a little bit more because it was something that was so compelling to me that we decided to do research on that this year. So basically ran a study talking to IT, CX, and business unit leaders, and then ran a parallel study talking to consumers. And the reason we did that was exactly what you're talking about. We wanted to see where are the gaps and where are the alignments between what companies are delivering to their consumers or their customers and what the consumers or customers really want. So from that research, there's a few key points that always stand out in mind to me. Number one, businesses want to use chatbots more than their customers want at this time. And I'm very careful to say that because I see some changes going on. So as of June of this year, only about 13% of consumers actually preferred chatbots and 39% actively avoided them. The rest said, well, we'll use them in select circumstances. So that's concerning for anyone who can see the value in a chatbot or a voice bot or for consumers who do use them and like them and for businesses who are offering them. And on the business side of it, about 35% of businesses were offering them as of June. Another 44% said they planned to add them this year. So a lot of business adoption of bots, but not that overwhelming consumer acceptance of that.
Do you think
Now,
that the business adoption was that driven by the AI hype or was that independent?
no, I think it was definitely driven by AI hype, but I also think that companies did not do a great job in the initial phases of bots. What they
Oh,
would
absolutely.
be, yeah, they weren't properly training their models. They were misapplying the bots. Say, oh, I've got a bot; it can do everything, and it was like, let's just throw it in here in our self-service FAQ or knowledge base, and not train it, and not work on the user interface, and not make it user friendly, and all that stuff.
Not
So
look at the
consumers,
analytics and optimize it, just
my
fire and
gosh,
forget.
that's yeah, music to my ears. You're absolutely right there. And so what was happening is that consumers like, well, this isn't doing what I needed to do. I'm frustrated. I'm just going to not even try anymore and go straight to an agent because I know the bot's not going to work. Now, what I think has happened in the second half of this year in particular, we see a lot of vendors, Cognigy included, coming out with purpose-built chatbot. Well, you guys have done that for longer than others, but coming out with more purpose-built chatbots. Like this bot will do this function, this will do this function, and let's work together to make sure that the user interface aligns with what your customers want, and let's make sure it's properly trained and all this stuff where it's like, put the brakes on here and let's really look at what we're doing with the bots. The reason I think we have turned a corner is despite those numbers I just gave you about consumer preferences, when we ask them, you know, how would you describe your most recent chatbot experience? 44% said it was positive. 28% said neither negative nor positive, was neutral.
Okay.
And only about a quarter basically said that it was not good. So to me, if you've got that, 13% are the only 13% like chatbots and go toward them and want to use them at all times. And you've got 44% saying, well, hey, it was a good experience last time. This tells me we have turned that corner, and I think we're going to continue seeing it get better. You have to do it. You have to use bots moving forward because, well, a lot of reasons. I mean, competitively, you want to be using them. You see huge benefits in, cost savings. You see huge benefits in self-service channels to get customers in and out more quickly. You have to use them, but you have to use them properly. And I think too many companies tried to boil the ocean and do too much too quickly. So that's one thing
Okay.
I would say is a gap. Another thing is consumers are definitely divided on technology by age. And that magic number is 45. In all the research we did, like that 45 and older, we're very consistent on what they liked and didn't like. And under 45, we're very consistent. So it's like this dividing line. And
I'm
there's a lot of,
curious about that because I feel like, I don't want to out my parents, but they both have iPhones. I'm not going to
yeah,
say elderly, they're advanced, and they love them and
yeah.
they know how to use them. So I think we're not in that, old people don't use technology phase anymore. So what's the significant difference then?
Yeah, it's not that old people don't use technology. It's just that more younger people use more advanced technologies than the older generations. So that 45 plus. So
Okay.
biggest, and there's a bunch of different areas in the CX world, but the biggest example I think that crystallizes this is if you don't offer voice and email any longer, you've now kind of ostracized that 45 plus. Like that's their preference in talking to companies. That's not to say that, people at 45 plus, which I fall into, would never use, chatbots. I use them and I found huge success in things like scheduling or rescheduling an appointment, finding an article about something that I'm trying, a product that I'm trying to, install, things like that. But if you don't offer chatbots and SMS and social media communications, business messaging services, you've now ostracized that under 45 group. So the key point there is you have, and there are many companies that fall in both those categories. Not as many that don't offer voice, but there are certainly a lot right now that don't offer as many digital channels as they should. So as a result, they're not meeting the needs of all age groups of their customers or potential customers. So that's a big one. I think you really have to be looking at your interaction channels and make sure that you're offering a nice full suite of internet interaction channels. Because even any given customer, I'm not saying that everyone under 45 is always going to use self-service or SMS or social. Sometimes they're going to pick up the phone or they're going to do a video and really need to talk to
Yeah, it
somebody.
depends on the issue in a lot of
Exactly.
cases. Yeah.
Exactly. But I will tell you that not enough companies at this point have a full enough suite of different channels for customers to interact with them on.
You think they don't
One of
have
those,
enough, or maybe do they not understand the demographics of their customer base enough? Because I feel like you should have a fairly good idea. And if 80% is going to fall into one group, I don't need to have a Twitter account and an Instagram account and everything for support. I can probably safely skip it, for example.
I think that there's definitely some validity to saying, okay, you don't really know your customer base or your prospective customer base. Because even though right now, my customers may be, very phone and email centric, at some point I want to tap into that younger crowd. So in order to do that, I may need to be out on Twitter. I may need to be out on LinkedIn. I may need to be out on TikTok or, other social media sites, or I may be needing to offer SMS. Things like that the younger generation is more apt to use, not the only ones to use, but
Yeah.
they're just more apt to use them. So I do think that's a big one, as far as just having a good voice of the customer program or understanding who your customers are. And I think some companies are actually really good at knowing their customers, but they haven't done enough to figure out who are my future customers, you know?
Or
So
is this sort of brings me to the second point. We love to talk about CX because it's sort of our industry, but we hate to admit it's not always a priority. And I'm wondering how much of this is maybe just saying, hey, look, it's great, it's a nice to have, it's not a priority. There, we don't have enough buy-in, we don't have enough budget. How do you balance those two things? What does it
Well,
depend on?
I think with what our research shows us is that for 3 straight years, customer service has been the number one business priority over things like security, revenue generation, employee satisfaction, investor satisfaction. So CX is customer service. Making sure customers are happy. Sorry, customer satisfaction. That's it's customer satisfaction. That is number one. So I think that most companies get it, but you're absolutely right. There are some who don't. And I would say, even if you already get it, oftentimes I talk to and work with companies who just don't have enough budget to do what they want. And I would say it's all about metrics and proof points. If you don't have a really good voice of the customer program, you're always going to have problems getting budget. You're never going to get exactly what you're looking for because you can't prove to the people who hold the purse strings at a company why you need something. So it's like the program that you have has to have a lot of analysis and reporting that executive level people can just look at and understand very quickly. They're not going to dig into the weeds, but if they can see, hey, wait a minute, we implemented this technology and we cut 20% of costs and our sales went up by 30% and CSAT went up by 5 points. Wait a minute, what's going on here? We
Yeah.
need more of this. So you
This
need
is
that
the
kind of
language
stuff.
they understand.
Exactly. And
But does it
so I
become a
think,
chicken and an egg thing where let's say I want to introduce one or two new channels, like you were talking about with some of these gaps? I'm not going to have any data on that. I can pull out stuff, market statistics or whatnot, but if I can't
yeah.
say, hey, look, I guarantee you this percentage of customers are going to want to use WhatsApp messaging or something.
Things there. I think it's all about building credibility. So I always tell companies, don't boil the ocean, as we talked about just a minute ago. Don't try and do too much at once because some of those, you're not going to, first of all, you're not going to be able to focus and really make sure that what you're doing, fine tuning it. Okay, let's look at our customer feedback. Let's keep fine tuning. And as we fine tune, all of our metrics are going in the direction we want. And then we'll present it to the executives for the next thing we want to do. I've now established trust. You can trust that I'm really looking at things and I'm everything. All my projects have come back and done really well. The other thing is to always start with a pilot, of some sort,
Yep.
because no one's going to expect you to be always perfect. But if you can go back and say, look, we talked about implementing, take your pick, video, and I thought that this would really be well received from our customers, but in our trial it wasn't, so we're going to move on to the next thing, and here's the next thing. They respect the fact that you've done a trial, you didn't cost them a lot of money, you've been able to prove or disprove your
Yeah.
hypothesis, basically.
And I mean, in a sense, even though it's a word with negative connotations, failure can build that credibility because you're saying, I'm not going crazy, I'm not jumping in, I'm taking the reasonable step, I'm testing, I'm coming back with the actual results, and I'm basing my decisions off that, not off emotion, not off my pet project.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing you can do, you can always survey your own customers and say, for example, in these scenarios, like one of the other gaps, for example, that we were just talking about, is that consumers want visual engagement much more than companies are offering it. They want video and they want screen sharing for specific functions, things like consultative calls, like with a lawyer or an investment advisor or a healthcare provider, troubleshooting a new product, software support, operations and training. You can think of all these types of things. We asked about this, and believe me, I did not expect the response that I got. Literally single-digit percentages said that they would use neither. So like low single, like 3%.
Wow.
For those types of functions, they wanted to use video screen sharing or both as a first order. Like right now, a lot of companies do that as an escalation point, and consumers don't want that. They use video to talk to their family. They use it, as they're
Exactly.
in business meetings.
At work
So
every day. It's
right, so it's just a way of life, but yet except where we spend our money. How does that make sense?
That seems to be the case for a lot of technology, though. It
Yeah,
almost seems like it's got to become kind of that everyday consumer
right,
expectation, and
right,
then finally years later it'll come to CX.
right. So anyway, so I think those are some of the ways that you can do it. It's real important to find your business stakeholders leverage them. You've got people in the company. It is a game in some ways. You got people in the company who are influential, and if you can get them on your side to see the value of something, to see the value of, hey, if we use generative AI here and help our agents in the contact center to reduce their average handle time because they're getting information through very quick prompts that they may be typing or they may not be typing because the virtual assistant may be listening and doing that all for them.
Yep.
Having that, could really make one of your stakeholders say, oh yeah, they'll take note and say, I'll support you on this. Let me talk to the CFO. He'll listen to me, that kind of thing.
Which is funny because that brings me to something you've already said and to our next question,
Yeah.
which is again about balance. And since you have the numbers, I know you know the answer. You said that customer service was a high priority, and
Yeah.
I believe it was 2 or 3 spots down was employee experience, and yet they're so intimately tied together. I'm wondering, what would you say in terms of balancing the two? Because especially contact center agents are finding their job is only becoming more complex. So that employee experience, how separable is that really from customer service anymore?
That's a very, very important point. We are seeing shifts here. So let me give you some numbers that I think will help. 2 years ago, we asked companies which approach is most important to your organization. This is like 1,800 companies. This is a big study. Improving CSAT over agent productivity, or improving agent productivity over CSAT. And you talk to people and they say, well, both are important. It's like, no, which is most important though? 85% said improving CSAT over agent productivity.
Yep.
1 year later, which was the end of last year, and we're actually asking this question again this month, so I'll see how it goes. But 1 year later, only 67%, still the majority, but going from 85% to 67% said CSAT over agent productivity, and a third now, 32.7, I was like almost 33%, said improving agent productivity over CSAT is most important. So that was a big shift, went from 15% to 33% saying agent productivity is more important. So and my suspicion, my hypothesis is that this year that's going to continue. We're going to see more importance on agent productivity. Why? Well, because I think companies have finally seen that happy agents equal happy customers. In our research, we've been able to show if you can keep your agent turnover or attrition under 15%, your CSAT scores go up by about 26%. So, it just kind of shows you want to keep these agents, you want to keep them happy. You're spending a lot of money on hiring new people. I think that's the other thing is just, especially during COVID, the turnover rates went way up. They've come down now. And I think there's a few reasons why they've come down. AI is definitely helping to fill that gap.
Mm.
I am not seeing AI replacing agents. I think there was a big fear there. I am seeing it affecting future hiring though. So if you, in 2023, if you did not use AI at all in the contact center, you hired about 2.6 times the number of new agents versus those who were using AI. So AI definitely is helping make the existing agents a lot more productive. And in some cases, it's requiring that you don't need as many new agents because it's handling a lot of those basic functions that an entry-level agent, for example, might have handled before. So we're seeing AI having a big impact there. But I would definitely say that the two, you're absolutely right. I mean, you can't have both be the number one business priority. Obviously, one's got to take hold over the other. But the reason customer satisfaction is important is because ultimately, whatever we do in a company is going to hopefully make our customers happy. So there is definitely a realization now that employee experience is one of the big things that makes the customers happy. So definitely growing area of importance. And I think it's bringing AI into there, bringing specifically virtual assistants, chatbots, voice bots is really going to help companies manage their growth. I talked to a lot of companies in this last research study who said, we're really growing. So our growth curve, of our company is going like this, but our agent curve is kind of going like this, so we've got this gap that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we can't fill it because we can't find the people. But now with AI, it's really helping to fill that gap.
So we're about out of time here, but I'm curious. This is not a numbers question. if you were to, I mean, we were all teenagers, we all had jobs that probably were not the most fun, right? And you learned, if someone walks into your store, your movie theater, your restaurant, wherever you're working, and people are standing around, they're not helping, they're not paying attention, they're on their phone, they're whatever, it immediately makes a bad impression, and that was important. And yet, for contact center agents, okay, they're not standing in a retail store, but they are the front line. That's exactly what the first thing people experience. And I'm wondering why are people only figuring out now that, the people who are the face of your organization, especially for customers who are upset, that suddenly that's worth taking seriously. Is it, did somebody's on the C-level's bonus, get tied to a new metric, for example? Is it general awareness? Is it because the job is so much more complex now? Do you have any? It's a big question.
Oh, no, it is. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I worked in a restaurant as a younger kid. It was always like drilled into us. The customer is always right. When a customer comes in, you stop talking, you go, all that. You're absolutely right.
Hands out of your pockets, look them in the eye. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I still think we see that in frontline, workers where they're in person. I mean, you still see them doing it wrong too.
I didn't want to say it, but yes.
I think a lot of it, there's a few things. I think the technology has gotten better. So I think a lot of it is when you can start looking at analytics and see the numbers of what a bad customer experience does for a company, what it does for customers leaving your company. I mean, right now, 44% of consumers will leave a brand, will leave a company after one bad experience. So when you start seeing numbers like that come out and you start realizing, hey, wait a minute, there's a bunch of technology out here that I can use to help me improve this. I think that's one of the things that kind of open the eyes of some of the executives to say, oh, wow, this is important. I think just starting to report on things like NPS and CSAT and using those in annual reports is something that caught the executive attention. So I think a lot of it is all about data, like, okay, what's happening in my customer experience, and are we doing a good job, and is it affecting the bottom line? And they start to see that yes, it is, and customers have more of a voice. I think another huge thing is just that customers have a voice because of social media. All of a sudden, one viral social media post can make or break a company. Whoa, that caught some attention, and on the positive and negative side, like, oh, an influencer said something about my product and now we've got more orders than we can handle. Or, an influencer said something poor about my product and now we're in trouble.
There's a screenshot of the chat on Twitter or something like that.
Yes. So they started seeing how influential customers were and they said, well, we better start, investing in and looking at how we're handling those people. And my big thing I always question, to be honest, Jared, is why aren't we using this technology in more and more places of a company? Like, why aren't the technology to analyze a contact center agent is so sophisticated and so advanced and so useful? Why aren't we using it for field service workers, for salespeople, for HR people, for the rest of the company? Wouldn't it be great to have that kind of analytics on all your employees and just continuously make people more and more productive and more happy and
absolutely,
and help them more with virtual assistants?
So on the vendor side, to be honest, that's a question you ask when you say, hey, I have AI agents, I have virtual assistants, whatever it is. And, for a service process, whether it's an HR process, whether it's a, return an item process, whether it's I need to, ask for vacation time, whatever, ultimately they're service processes. But the difference is the customer side has scale. I can serve, I've say 10,000, 100,000 users. The internal side doesn't. So unfortunately, it's the employees who typically lose out.
That's right. And I think that as companies, kind of going full circle from our starting point, I think as companies get better and better at how they apply and how they train their chatbots, it's going to have such an overwhelmingly positive impact on not only the business and the business's productivity, but also the customer and the customer satisfaction. If I can do something in 60 seconds over, interacting with the bot that would take me, 10 minutes on the phone because I have to wait on hold and, there's, oh, can you hold on for a minute? Let me check on that. I mean, I'm much happier as a customer.
I think my personal theory is when we get to that day, it's the day people they'll stop using the word bots because just talking to your phone, to your computer is so normal that it's not even considered an extra thing. It's
Yeah.
considered an intrinsic feature that is just everything has.
I know. I always wonder, are we going to get to the point where you really truly don't know if you're either talking to or texting with a bot or a live agent? And it seems odd to think now because usually you can tell, one way or another. You can see the nuances, but think about how it was just 2 years ago. You really could tell, and think about how many advances we've made now. So fast forward another 2 years, and what's it going to be like? It's
As
interesting
long as
to
they're getting my problem solved, I really don't care. And I think
exactly.
that's ultimately where most people will land. They don't care about the technology. They just, let's get it done.
That's right. That's right.
All right. I could probably, come after you for a lot more data, but unfortunately, our time is up. But I really want to thank you for joining us today and giving us so much insight, but particularly the details behind it.
Yeah. No. Thanks for having me. It was my pleasure.
All right. Well, thanks again, and we hope to have you on again soon.
Thanks, Jared.